Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am joined by Jonathan Cohen today. Jonathan is a very special guest because he also has a podcast that he's been working on for several years. It's called Inside the Inspired. In addition to that, Jonathan has been working on several different facets of self improvement in his own life that really we felt like would be a synergy and a connection between what I'm also interested in and just a lot of opportunity for growth and learning in this conversation. So, really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Jonathan, and looking forward to today.
My pleasure, Danny. Thanks for hosting, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start off just with, giving you an opportunity to kind of describe your origin story, how you got into this space of podcasting and self-improvement and growth, where it all started for you, if it was like a specific event in your life that triggered all of this or interest in it, or maybe that was just something that was in you from a young age. So curious if you could speak on that.
I don't think it was necessary. Let me start a little bit differently. I think everyone has a desire to make the most of their lives, whether they admit it or not, whether they're at the bottom of the barrel or at the top of the mountain. Everyone has something inherent in them that they want to work on and build. And some people have a roadmap to do it. Some people follow intuition. Some people never get up off the couch and figure out what that looks like. And that's from my own experience, right? Having served as a criminal prosecutor in the Bronx for 3 years, 2 years Israeli military, 5 years public service collectively. I've worked with children who have special needs. I've volunteered in many different philanthropic settings and met all different types of people from all walks of life. And you see work ethic as a common theme in the sense who has it, who doesn't have it, who wants more from their life, who's not willing to put in the work to get more from their life. And my origin story is just someone who grew up in beautiful suburban neighborhood, have extremely loving parents, protective parents. I'm the oldest of four siblings, married with a beautiful wife and baby girl who I love very, very dearly. And it really just stems from this individual who suffered from a bunch of different diagnoses like lack of self-awareness, but more, I guess, clinically, uh, ADHD. But at the time that it wasn't as much of a fad as it is now, I guess you could say. So there was a lot of negative stigma around it where all the teachers were concerned and your parents are called in and your college counselor is telling you your parents are going to have to buy a building if you want to get into college. That's a true story. And it's kind of this, I guess, narrative around I had no self-belief, no self-awareness. I was constantly being told what I was and wasn't good at. And I believed those stories because that's what was in front of me. And as I progressed through high school, into the military, into college, law school, business school, started to tell myself different stories. I started to learn what was possible through experience. I started to learn how to believe in myself. And as someone who had those kind of underlying, what I'll say, bad habits, someone who didn't like to read, who didn't take school seriously, and that became a diagnosis for quote unquote learning disability, which really was, I guess, a veil for a bad work ethic. I learned through time how to put myself in a position to take myself seriously so I could get more out of life. And, my time in the military really taught me how to be a human. It taught me how to take care of myself, cultivate self-sufficiency, taught me how to take myself seriously. And then I went to Muhlenberg College, small school in Allentown, Pennsylvania, like 2,200 kids, and a liberal arts education, which showed me a diverse academic landscape that let me study under awesome professors who taught me about all different types of topics. And I was able to explore curiosity, get my mind thinking in a whole bunch of different directions, and eventually kind of lean in to the law. And through law school and business school, I formulated a background as a professional who had an interest in criminal law, but also in business. And that curiosity as an attorney led me to go become a criminal prosecutor specializing in domestic violence crimes as a special victims prosecutor, where I prosecuted thousands of cases helping victims of domestic violence and working in an environment like the Bronx where the case volume is extremely high and trial by fire, right? So in my time in the military and an SVU, you're learning on the fly and you're making a lot of mistakes and the consequences are very, very high when you make those mistakes. And so you have to learn how to take yourself seriously. You have to learn how to believe in yourself very quickly and acclimate to the circumstances, kind of rising to the occasion, if you will. And so my experience is really rooted in practical, in the field, in the courtroom, trial by fire type of moments that forced me to level up and become someone that not even I could question.
Mm, that's super fascinating. Um, I feel like there's a lot of pushback towards like people that are, I don't know, looked at as like gurus or people that seem to come across like they have an answer for everything. And, like we're both, interested in the space of like becoming the best version of yourself and sharing ideas around that and having conversations around it. So I'm wondering, like, as you've progressed towards hosting the podcast and having really great conversations with people in this space, have you experienced any pushback, or maybe like what would be your response to somebody who is asking about like credentials to speak on these subjects? Because it seemed like in your journey, like your life journey, a lot of it is based on practicality, like you're saying, and applied knowledge, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this crazy like rags to riches story that I feel like a lot of us are drawn to. And I'm also, I don't necessarily have that crazy like comeback story that everybody's fascinated by. So maybe if you could just speak to, how you would react to somebody who's kind of doubting that your credentials or your ability to like speak on these subjects.
It's a great question because I had it too when I started. I'm like getting even the chills thinking about it, where like I didn't give myself permission to be the authority. I was so infatuated by other people's journeys that I lost sight of my own. And as much as I tried to share my experience, I wasn't giving myself enough credit for the things that I had done. I didn't have a rags to riches story, as you put it. And I had an upward trajectory, but as we know, progress isn't always linear. It happens kind of in a zig and a zag. And I think when it comes to what I've come to characterize and understand now, particularly within the landscape that you're framing the question, it's more of a personal branding kind of approach where like what frames you and positions you as the authority. And I'm going to put that on the shelf because I don't think that's what you are asking, but we could talk about that separately. And so it comes down to creating a trail of evidence. It comes down to having enough credibility within the particular space. So, for example, in my case, as someone who speaks about mental toughness, mental resilience, I'm not David Goggins. I haven't done 100+ mile races. I haven't done a lot of the things that these wild ultra endurance athletes have done. I've done some pretty cool stuff where I raised tens of thousands of dollars from multiple organizations by doing awesome feats of strength like 1,018 pull-ups in 4 hours, raising over 20 grand for the Friendship Circle, the Goggins Challenge, and adding 2 miles on top of it, raising 15 grand towards curing Alzheimer's through research, 1,000 push-ups in 4 hours. But like, there's always someone who's done more. Someone set the record for push-ups. Someone set the record for pull-ups. Someone's done thousands of miles, right? And I've run marathons. I've done all these things. And like, it's cool, right? But like when I read Goggins' book and when I read any kind, and you could see all the personal development books behind me, this is like a fraction of the content that I've read. You have to start to, like I was saying, put it in a frame of not even you can question it. And so
Mhm.
what makes you the authority is going to be what research you've done, what experiences you've had, and how someone can benefit from it because you're able to add value based on the experiences that you've acquired. And so when I reflected on my journey, it wasn't that I did the 1,000 pull-ups. It was what I did in order to reach the position to be able to do the 1,000 pull-ups. All the lives that were impacted from organizing the GoFundMe to doing all of the training to publicizing the event to bringing over 100 people together to the point where people were doing their first pull up to the point where one kid even stood out of his wheelchair to do a pull up. Like there was all those little micro moments that helped me as much as I question myself where like the night or two before I'm like, will I even be able to do that thing? And, now I'm training for a 58-mile run. I'm sure we're going to talk about it. Like, there's been times where I'm super scared about it. And, like, how does someone who talks about mental toughness have a right to feel fear? Right? Like,
Hmm.
you have to kind of talk yourself through those moments. And then once you do, you have experience of having overcome that hump. So you can now go and offer that insight to somebody else. And so, when you read enough books, when you interview enough experts, for example, like I've interviewed over 100 people on this topic, I've read over 100 books on this topic. I've spent over 5 years of public service in the field as a soldier and as a government official. Like, there's all these different elements that frame me personally as an authority, and I'm still not David Goggins. So, like, I also kind of always look at it like the NBA is always a great metaphor for me because when you think about where Steph Curry went to college, like no one had heard of Davidson before.
Right.
No players come out of Davidson since. Like what may gives him the authority to be the best 3-point shooter of all time. In fact, he's got the experience and the reps, and he put them in, and he worked when no one was looking. Sure, it might be in his blood to a degree, but he amplified and enhanced it and put in the work. But like, no one's ever heard of Davidson besides Steph. If it wasn't for Steph Curry, like no one in the mainstream would have heard of Davidson. So
Yep.
like, you have to kind of go out there and put yourself as the authority. So even if you don't necessarily have the rags to riches story, what evidence is within your particular area of expertise that helps frame you as the authority? Is it that you've interviewed over 100 people on this particular topic? Is it that you've researched this particular topic? Are you reading meta-analyses in your spare time? Are you reading research papers? Like, are you putting Google notifications on so that this way every single morning you get all the top information that comes into your inbox about that particular topic, and then you're sharing what you learn? Are you writing about it? Are you sharing insight about it? Are you helping people in your spare time about it? Like, are you testing your theories? Are you creating frameworks around it? And then how are you foolproofing those frameworks? Are you recording content on it? Are you teaching courses about it? Right. And so once you start to compile all that up, it's inevitable that you become the authority just by virtue of the fact it's been enough years, you spent enough hours, and you know what you're talking about because you did the work.
That's powerful insight. I really like what you said about just compiling a trail of evidence because in the beginning, I feel like this is applicable to not only people who are interested in podcasting or the social media space, but like if you're starting a business and you're offering a service, but you don't have any clients yet, right? Or you don't have any experience or you don't have like a history, a track record, you have to be able to step into that space and do all of like what you just said, doing the research and showing and proving that you are qualified to provide that service, even though you don't necessarily have history of it. So I think that's a really powerful frame of mind to take into it. And I thought about this a lot too, when I was first getting things off the ground here. Like, how do you communicate that you are doing all the things that you're talking about? Because there's so much fluff out there, and social media in particular. Like, there's so many people saying that they're doing these crazy challenges or doing these, feats of endurance, and they're not necessarily showing the proof. And physically, it's easy to. I feel like with a physique or the workouts, like you can easily film that or show that in some way. But with like mental toughness, like you're talking about, or discipline, it's a little bit harder to communicate those things, I feel like, to an audience. So I'm wondering, yeah, maybe we could talk about, the ultra marathon that's coming up and how that, reinforces mental toughness. And it seems like it's one way that, you can show clearly that this is a mental toughness exercise, right? Like you're doing an incredibly long run. Um, so how has training for this and preparing for the 58-mile ultra marathon reinforced your mental toughness?
So going back to a couple of the other things that you were bringing up before you asked the question, and I'll get to it, is that how do you communicate these things, right? Well, first off, what is it that you want to say? You have to really understand what emotion you want person to experience, like the audience to experience, and really sit with yourself and ask yourself, like, what is it I'm really trying to do? For me, I want to inspire, I want to motivate. And that's even in my bio. I'm a motivator. And like, I remember when I didn't have that clarity, like, yeah, of course, I want to be considered an expert on this particular topic, but like, the only person that can really give me that authority is me. And from there, it's who it resonates with and who's impacted by it. And it may not be all the followers on social media. It might just be the people in my office. It might just be the people in my family. It might just be the person in the mirror. And how you communicate it is based on how someone feels when they see your stuff, right? Like, is there something that makes them want to take action? Is there something that they adjust in their particular behavior? And so you communicate it by leading by example. Are you doing the things that you say that you're doing? And are you following through on those things every day? Are you telling people to eat healthy and eating unhealthy, as a simple example? Are you telling people to run far and sitting on the couch? Are you telling people that you're going to train for an ultra and run a 10K? Like, are you going to think that you're too good for the training? Are you going to overtrain and get hurt and then delay it and never do it? These are all things that have crossed my mind. These are all things that I've I've experienced, and when it comes to how you communicate it, it really comes down to how you lead and what it is that you want someone to get out of what you have to say and offer. And then is there an improvement or change in their particular behavior? So if there isn't, then maybe you need to have an adjustment, and that adjustment can be framed in a litmus test by like, well, what is it that I want? What action do I want someone to take as a result of seeing what it is that I'm doing? Do I want them to be inspired and run? Do I want them to be inspired and donate? Do I want them to be inspired and change? Change to what? And then the more specific you get on that particular outcome, the easier it is to navigate how you design your content and how you design your particular actions. And that's kind of the phase that I'm in now. That was the learning curve that I had been through over the last couple of years that's now showing me the fruits of my labor. And so the lessons, getting to the core of your question around how I've experienced building mental toughness through this particular training block, we'll call it, is at all points I've had like crazy feelings of fear that I won't be able to finish this thing. And even after having, I mean, after I did the 1,000 pull-up challenge, like, I never really feel the need to do overhand pull-ups again. Now I know I can do chin-ups and neutral grip pull-ups and still be okay. But there was something about the strict overhand pull-up that was like this gold standard of fitness, that you could do it that many times. But if you look at Truett Haynes, he does 1,000 pull-ups as a warm-up in like an hour, you know? So like, but the first time he did it, I think it took him like 4.5 or 5 hours. Now he's doing like 1 to 2K, and now he's training to, he set the record, someone beat it. Now he's training for 10K. Like, you can't let those narratives of what someone else is going to accomplish get in your way. It's more like, that's great for sports science. That's great for humanity. That's great for all of the things that that person's going to contribute to how people are inspired and advance. In my particular situation, it's like, well, what can I do with the time that I have to make a difference? And something like training for an ultra, I've learned that no matter what fears I face, the only thing I could really do about it is control what I can control and take action on the things that are in front of me. And I've learned that the only way to really beat fear is to run towards it. And in interviewing F-16 pilots and Navy SEALs and SVU prosecutors and judges and Ironmans and professional UFC fighters and strength and conditioning coaches, like, how you prepare for the cage match. Like, Natan Levy said this on my podcast. If you're not scared, either you're too stupid or you don't care enough. And like, that always sits with me because like, I do care enough. And it's okay to feel fear. It's just, what are you going to do about it? And as long as you're doing something about it, like training or priming, good things can come. So the main takeaway for me has been, don't just sit there and feel the emotion, like feel the emotion, but like be doing something about it. So I've given myself plenty of proof that I could do this thing and I feel good. But like no matter how much I train, the pain's going to be there regardless. So
Hmm.
like how am I going to navigate that pain? How am I going to trust myself to handle that pain? How am I and that depends on the relationship that I have with myself. So instead of gritting my way through it, it's really become a practice of how I can love myself. Not to the point of, oh, I love you so much, don't put yourself in that position. It's more like, because I love you, I gotta put you in this position, man. And
Hmm.
we gotta do this one step at a time. And you can't run 7 miles at once. You gotta run it one step at a time. And as long as you're putting one foot in front of the other, it doesn't have to be about the grit of grinding. It can be about the grit of driving. And if you push yourself through with love and sincerity, you'll find that on the other side of that is everything you ever wanted.
Mm. Yeah, having a little tough love for yourself, it sounds like. And also what you were talking about with the feeling of the fear never going away. And it reminds me of my personal experience. I played soccer my entire life. I had some higher stakes games in my college career, and no matter how much practice you put in and like time and effort that you put into preparing for it, the butterflies really never go away. And that's a good thing. It's almost like similar to, any sort of work experience, like the stress of a big meeting and the anxiety behind it. You're never going to completely eliminate that, but you can put yourself in a program and put yourself in a framework that sets you up to feel at least more comfortable with it. And it seems like it's about channeling those butterflies and that anxiety into the right methodology, the right practice leading up to it.
I mean, that and breath work. Breath work
Mm-hmm.
has done wonders for me. So if anyone's ever looking for a physiological hack, like nasal breathing has been the number one thing that before I stood up in court or before I had a big moment or whether it's I speak in front of an audience or I'm like nervous to go out and run or do the 1,000 or whatever it is, any big moment in my life where I felt those butterflies, because that was my biggest thing, curing that anxiety. Nasal breathing and deep belly breathing have been the most subtle and effective way for me to calm down my heart rate and to like physiologically hack myself into getting to a calm state so I could perform. Obviously, there's philosophy like stoicism that helps with that too, being present in the moment. But physiologically, if anyone's looking for something actionable, deep belly breathing, closing your mouth, breathing strictly through your nose, opening up the belly and the diaphragm, hands down, number one, whether you feel like you're going to get sick or you feel like you have the butterflies, that is the number one hack at all points, bar none.
Is there a specific type of breathing? I talked about 478 breathing on a previous podcast as far as like ways to hack your subconscious was the title of the episode. Do you do like box breathing, 478, or is there like a
Nothing
specific
crazy,
type?
man.
Okay.
Strictly nasal breathing. I
Okay.
run with no headphones and I only breathe through my nose unless I'm doing some speed work and then like it gets to the point where I can't. I've done box breathing. I've I'm I've read Breathe by James Nestor. I did a great podcast with Dr. Dmitry Polyakov, who taught me all about postural restoration and healing my back. And that's we could go deeper into that, but I really do not overcomplicate it other than shutting my mouth and breathing through my nose and doing that at all points. If I'm driving, if I'm at my desk, if I'm not speaking, like I don't sit with my mouth open. My
Hmm.
mouth is always closed. And that forces me to listen more. That forces me to breathe through my nose. And like you'll never really catch me with my mouth open unless I'm like sleeping on a plane next to my wife and she like takes a photo. That's probably the only time.
Yeah, that's the only time there'll be evidence of that. Dang. So you're one of the savages that runs with no headphones in.
Oh yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
that's crazy. I wanna hear more about the training regimen in that case for this 58-mile ultra. No headphones seems to be a requirement. Maybe some nasal breathing prior to some of these longer runs. What else are you doing to train your body and mind going into that race?
The main thing has been no, I don't want to say no barbells because I've used barbells, but I'm doing a lot of running. I'm doing about 50 to 60 miles a week. I'm aiming to get 8-ish hours on the road over the course of the week. I haven't really done more than that just because I don't have time with a baby and, family, how, like, everyone has all the excuses in the world. Like, I have a full-time position that demands quite a lot of me, like 50 to 60 hours a week. And the training is happening usually between like 5 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., depending on the day. And so it's largely been 5 to 10 mile runs during the week, typically 5, 10, 5, 10 rest, and then a 30-mile weekend. And that'll be either all in one run and like 30 minutes the next day, or about 3 to 3.5 hours, and then like 30 to an hour the next day. So it's about 4 to 5 hours on the weekend, and then 4 to 5 hours over the course of the week. And so I'll mix in calisthenics every single day except for the days that I train lower body, just so I can give my whole upper body a break. And I'll typically do between 50 and 100 reps of some variation of pull ups, chin ups, neutral grip pull ups, and chin ups, and dips and push ups. And that's been more than enough to keep my upper body at bay. I also weight train about 3 times a week. So I'll do like a push pull and like either no run on a Monday, or this week I did run on a Monday. So it was like a 45-minute run and then like a quick push pull and throwing in the pull ups and push ups. And then like 2 to 6 movements, usually horizontal bodybuilding structure. And that's like a 3x8, if you will, or a 3x12, something like that, but all supersets. And I'll do that at a decently heavy weight, nothing crazy, but like 70 to 80s if it's rows and incline and kind of back to back. And then lower body day. So it's like heavy lifting every other day. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, push pull, lower body, and arms and shoulders. And then calisthenics every other day except the days that I run and lift legs. So that's kind of been the physical regimen. I've hit a couple marathons. I've hit a couple 30-mile runs. I did like 130 and 133 that I think was actually 35. Just kind of BS because of the watch, but we'll save that for another time. And
Mm.
the nutrition's been really fun. Pretty much the same thing every day. Some form of like turkey burger and eggs in the morning, sometimes with a bagel, a protein shake, like usually just protein and water. Lunch will usually be like some kind of protein, like a sweet potato and like avocado. And then for dinner, it'll also be more like either ground beef with sweet potatoes. And then for dessert, I'll do like Greek yogurt, which is like my number one favorite meal of the day. It's Greek yogurt, frozen berries or cherries, and honey, and that's kind of all I'm eating. This week I'm adding in like homemade banana bread because my wife made it, but aside from that, like that's kind of been the nutrition and training over the course of the last couple months.
Mm, gotcha. Dang, you're dialed in, man. I gotta say that is an impressive regimen. I've done one marathon in my life, and leading up to it, I feel like I was woefully unprepared as far as like cross training and doing some of the strengthening that's required to prevent injuries. So I basically like limped my way into the marathon with like Achilles tendonitis, shin splints, and like I don't know how I made it through, but you definitely tap into a different place mentally when you're on the track. And also when you have people waiting for you at the finish line. I feel like that was
100%.
that was massive for me.
Yeah, you should definitely just add like one more run like in the weeks leading up. And I was able to do a marathon no problem, training like 3 times a week, like running 3 times a week. I own it like 2 short runs, like 5 to 7, and then like one longer run, nothing longer than like only 120 miler in the prep, and that took a couple months. but I think a marathon is very doable for people. Instead of running for miles, run for time. So like instead of running for like 5, 6 miles, run for like an hour, run for an hour and a half, and then 2 hours. And then if you could work your way up to 3 hours over the course of like 2 months, you could easily run a marathon, no shin splints.
Mm, that's interesting. I never heard of the concept of running for time, but
Yeah,
it kind of
changed my
forces you to
life.
slow down.
Forces you to slow down because you're also nasal breathing. So if you do those things back to back, you're building your aerobic engine. I don't know enough of the science like every other fitness trainer that may or may not listen to this. But I know from personal experience, nasal breathing, no headphones, which, honestly just brings me the most peace, I guess you could say. It really just is one of those things that like once I stopped using headphones, all my excuses in life outside of training started to go out the window. It's like, oh, well, I guess I don't really need the belt in order to go to the office. Ah, I guess I don't really need to worry about that one extra thing. Like, I'll still make it work. It just fun. Like, training with no headphones forces you to be super present, and
Mm,
and it also eliminates tons of excuses.
mm. Yeah, your point there made me think about some of my experience when I was training for the marathon. Like, I'm wondering if you have any sort of epiphanies or breakthroughs on your runs, because I felt like some of the longer runs, I would be stewing over some like work, tough work situation that was coming up in my life or any other, difficult interpersonal thing. And then by the end of the run, I just had like a solution. It was kind of crazy. So I'm wondering if that happened to you on some of your training runs.
Definitely not all of them, but definitely some of them for sure. Like all my great ideas for events that I host or podcast ideas, like, or maybe I'm just so jaded by it at this point, I don't even realize. But I would say, like, any walk with no headphones or run with no headphones, I'm always coming up with something. It's not foolproof. It's not going to solve all your problems. And same thing with nasal breathing. Like, it's not going to solve all your problems, but it'll get 15% better. I could definitely say that. And 15% compounding is pretty good return on the investment, in my humble opinion.
Hmm. Absolutely. So I want to understand a little bit more about the motivation behind this 58-mile run. You mentioned that you're donating. I saw that you were talking about, was it the Friendship Circle?
Mhm.
Some of the runs are, it's all for the purpose of the Friendship Circle. So what exactly kind of spurred the desire to do that run?
So the Friendship Circle is an organization that helps children build real life skills, children who have special needs, and they're able to learn real life skills like going to the bank or the grocery and being integrated into society organically. And for me, as someone who was uh, very labeled, we'll call it, as a kid, uh, working with these kids over the course of my life has always been very inspiring because, they're never really in a bad mood. They're always smiling and they're always giving and they're always energetic and uh, giving you good energy. So this particular run, I mean, I've thought about 50 for a while. The Goggins challenge was a great precursor to it, and then adding 2 miles to it also like gave it that little extra zest. But the motivation behind it is that I had seen ultra running as a thing kind of a few years ago, circa 2020, or I guess 2021. And, you know, a lot of ultra runners these days have the same kind of story around listening to Goggins, becoming familiar with his story. You start to learn that these things are possible. Then you want to see if you could do it. And the whole concept of a marathon was like, oh, I'll never be able to do that. And I was like, one day I just kind of flipped the switch and was like, why not me? Like, why
Hmm.
can't I be someone who, like, what's so, like, I've seen people in worse shape run marathons. Like, why can't I lift heavy and run a marathon? And so that kind of happened in 2020 where I wanted to be able to lift and I wanted to be able to run or do really cool strength endurance training. And a lot of my influences, I learned about David Goggins, but Ross Edgley is actually my number one influence. He's a stoic sports scientist, we'll call him, and he's done crazy physical feats from endurance, strength endurance, you name it, he's done it. You're talking about a marathon. This guy did like 30 marathons in 30 days, and like he's built like an ox. So his main sport's actually swimming, and he did crazy things like swimming around Great Britain. And I was also reading about Nick Bear in like 2020 or 2021, and he did like crazy rucks for charity. And so that's kind of where all these things started. Those two guys were kind of like pillars. And I also don't want to discount Brian Mazza, who's also been on my podcast. He had done a 50-mile run, and like you see people do these things, and you just ask yourself, like, can you do it? And then you start to investigate it a bit more. You start to run a bit further. You start to train a bit harder. You start to get in a little bit better shape. And then enough years go by and you've done enough things. And it's like, well, why can't I? And so this kind of became this testament to me proving myself to myself and doing something good in the process of working with an organization that represents something so meaningful to me and has such an incredible impact on people that they go hand in hand. And so if I could raise awareness and also putting my own money down and raising money in the process, you know, for me, this run, the 50 is one thing. The eight is because my mom, her lucky number is eight, and it's just been like a thing in our family forever. So like we go to Vegas, you put, a few bucks on eight, you always win, like little things like that.
Mhm.
And I would say like 52, a double marathon didn't scare me enough. Like 50 at one point just seems super doable, even though I haven't really run more than technically 33. But like I know I could run for another 2, 3 hours if I had to. So like 58 felt like this right number that has a significance to me. You need to have a clear motivation when you do things, like a clear reason why. And eight has a significance to me. And then five, uh, Thompson, man, it's like that evil eye type stuff. It's just like it protects you, you know? So
Mhm.
um those two numbers together, thank God they're not flipped, I'll say that right now. And that's kind of the significance behind why 58.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And when is the run coming up?
September 7th. So 15 days.
Dang, that's right around the corner, man.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
sounds like your regimen is dialed in, and you got the right attitude going into it. So, looking forward to seeing you crush that.
I appreciate it, man. We'll see what happens. I'm optimistic.
Hmm. And another question came to mind, kind of going back to your training regimen when you're describing that, along with your full-time job, 50 to 60 hours per week, and having a kid. Where does one find all this time in the day? How does that all pan out? And what kind of like tools or tricks would you recommend to somebody who's trying to find more hours in the day like that?
You don't find time, you make time.
Hmm.
And that's the first place. That's the first tool. That's the first trick or tip. And you become super present with everything that you're doing. So when I'm training, I'm training. If I'm training with my daughter, then I'm entertaining her in between sets and I'm staying focused as best as I can. Not every set is perfect because she'll want to touch an outlet or she'll climb up the stairs or like, she'll be right under me and I don't want to like step on her. So like nothing is perfect about it, but you do the best you can with what you have. And I'll bring her on the runs with me, right? So I'll stack certain things as well. I think also I do certain things like I don't look at my phone for the first 30 minutes of the day and I'll spend that time reading because I want to be present. Like this morning, instead of running, I went for a walk. I didn't want to work out after that though, so I don't know how that's gonna go in the future. I still did, but it was very difficult. I was in like slow motion. But a lot of it comes down to understanding that you have to make the time and that no one's going to do these things for you. Like self-sufficiency is important. And the best way to take care of everyone else around me is to take care of me first. And I know that my wife and baby will be up by around 6:30. So if I'm not getting started by then at the very least, then like I'm behind the eight ball. And so I do my best not to wake up in a frenzy. That even if I've woken up 15 minutes late, like I try to remind myself of the times that I couldn't even wake up before 6. even if that was a year or two ago or a few years ago, and realizing that it's only going to get harder. So if I don't work on these things now, then it's inevitably going to fall because everyone keeps telling me, you'll see when you get married, you'll see when you have kids, you'll see when you get a house, you'll see when you have a job, you'll see when, man, I've been commuting over an hour each way for like 3 years. And like now my commute's 40 minutes and I got 20 extra minutes as far as I'm concerned. If I wake up another 20 minutes extra early, then I have 40 more minutes in my day to do the thing, right? So it just really depends on how you look at it. You can either create a list of excuses or you can create a list of actions. And so it's important not to overstimulate yourself with too many responsibilities and also pick the things that matter in the seasons that they do. Narrow focus is very key. Every day I have like three personal things I do, three professional things that I do, and they have to get done. And so they can be as simple as like send the email or work on the project. And um, in creating this time, it's like I realized, particularly with podcasting, creating a big backlog has been very important. Outsourcing has been very important. Finding the different, I did a great episode with Dr. John DeMartini, and he's a human behavior specialist, where he talks about like assigning the value of your actions a dollar value and seeing like what those actions are bringing you in terms of like fulfillment and dollars and ranking them accordingly, and everything that's not bringing you in money, like take off your plate and outsource, right? And if you could do something more with that time, like, go spend that time doing it. So I spent less time doing $5 tasks and outsourcing them and focused more on my higher income tasks that I've been able to fortunately double down on and do well on. So I would say that those particular frames and systems have helped me get to a better space, and also, my inputs of who I study, and not just picking up the book, reading it, and not doing anything about it, but picking up the book, implementing it, testing it, iterating it, playing with the concepts, and moving forward or abandoning things that do or don't work, right? You have to take action. If you have too much clarity, you're not taking enough action, right? So I find the time by making the time, and the best way to make time, and I talk about this all the time, is to create opportunity, and you create opportunity by taking action. And if you're just waiting for things to come to you, like, you're playing the wrong game. Don't blame anyone for things. Don't blame the algorithm. Don't blame your parents. Don't blame your friends. Don't blame your partner. Take accountability, because the results you don't have isn't because the world's against you. That's just the story you're telling yourself. So if you change the narrative in your head and you start to realize, I got to make this happen, otherwise it won't. Yeah, that should light a fire under you. And if not, find something you really care about. And for me, I know what it is. So
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like you would be able to have more energy for these actions that you're taking if it's more purpose driven, right? Like if you have like a mission that you're absolutely locked in on that aligns with your values and just resonates with you so deeply, you won't really worry as much about, the amount of time that you're spending, editing things or waking up in the morning to prepare for a new podcast or to run or to do whatever, because it's like purpose driven. So I feel like that's also another, I guess, small little piece I would add on to what you're saying is where a lot of the energy comes from, right? It's not about the need for you to do certain things. A lot of it has to do with how those things align and resonate with you and your overall life.
100%, you said it perfectly. Leading a purpose-driven life is, I think, what all of us are after, and not enough of us have the right tools or courage to go seize it. So well said.
And other things that you've cut out as a part of that, you seem like you're adding all these things into your life and structuring your day. Inevitably, some things have to kind of fall off the radar. So I'm wondering if there's anything that you intentionally removed from your life, or maybe that has just fallen off naturally over the course of time.
The easiest thing is no alcohol and no weed. That has
Hmm.
been like number one, without a doubt. No, I've never tried any other drugs in my life, but those two are non-starters for me, and them being out of my life has been the number one contributing factor to my energy and to my speed. Like, I learned a ton, and I never talk about this topic. I was like thinking about it today on a walk, ironically, as we are talking about before. Like, there's a big part of me that was embarrassed about not how much I used to drink, because I think I did it as socially as any college kid or law student or lawyer. It just was like I have these big ambitious goals, and the more I blaze or the more I drink, like I won't be able to get them if I keep doing this. And so it's easy to look at me now and be like, oh, you know, look at all these things he's doing, but like it was a very common thing at the DA to go get a beer after work, and that was fine. I could still wake up and go train in the morning, and it wasn't the end of the world. But I learned about the negative effects of alcohol and weed through a lot of literature. Read The Body Keeps a Score. I read, and I consumed enough content over time to be like, hey, like, wow, alcohol really negatively impacts sleep. Weed does not help you stay. It's the quality of your sleep, right? So even if you're falling asleep faster, the quality of your sleep and duration, you're not able to enter REM as often because sleep cycles, right? Not like just I'm in REM for 4 hours straight. That's not the way it works. So
Mhm.
like it's it was really about understanding like my recovery and what was hindering it, why I would get sick, and the less I got sick, the better I could perform. And so that has been one main thing that I've really cut out of my life. The other thing is my screen time. I know these seem very obvious, but you know, they really do make a difference. I mentioned I don't look at my phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. That's a pretty like rigorous thing that I do on a daily basis. Here and there, like I falter just because I have to catch like a 4 a.m. flight. So if I wake up the train at like 2:45, like I need to make sure my alarm is on so I don't miss it. And I have to look at my phone and be like, oh, okay, like I got an hour 15 to like get in the car and like make it to the flight, but this is the time I have to wake up because light really disrupts the quality of sleep also. So like taking away screen time, taking away alcohol, weed, those have been probably the main things that have helped me perform at the current level that I'm at. And I think those three, as obvious as they are, I personally never really talk about the other two besides screen time. And I think it's just because there's never the right way, right? There's the corporate element that it could be addressed, or, old stigmas of how those two drugs were viewed or are viewed. Now less so, right? Because it's legalized, then it's becoming cooler to not drink, I guess you could say. At least that's kind of what my algorithm is showing me. And I would say those couple things have probably made the biggest difference in my ability to perform at this level.
Mm, gotcha. Yeah, those are great tips. I felt like when I used to smoke a lot of weed back in college days, like my vitality was just dying, like my lust for life, my excitement about very small things that I experience now, the sunset or getting up and doing a walk in the morning, like they just weren't as exciting anymore. And overall, that feeling just compounds to kind of kill your motivation in all different areas of life. So yeah, I cannot agree more with that one. Alcohol, working on that one a bit more recently, but it's tough, being like in your
Yeah,
20s, it's
man.
really hard to fully
So
eliminate it.
hard.
And there's so many things going on where it's like the center of the activity. So it's really hard to like remove yourself from those because you're kind of killing some social ties along the way. So yeah, it's a work in progress though.
I would say like what are those relationships based on? Like I would say things really changed for me at 28, and then I really stopped at like 29, 30. I never like went even now I still have a glass of wine. I haven't had hard liquor in a couple years, except for my wedding and maybe like one sip post my wedding. Because someone like, it'll be like a super rare scotch that's like it doesn't turn me on in the way that it used to. So like I can live without the super rare scotch. Maybe after the ultra and after a few other goals, I'll kind of revert back to that part of my life. But right now, it's just not a priority. And I would say like what I've come to learn about that chapter of my life is like, well, if I had stopped and if I had these ambitious goals, like, yeah, it's going to be super uncomfortable. And that's an honest conversation that anyone could have with themselves, right? I don't think anyone's perfect about it. Like, for me, you're talking about how you lost some vitality. For me, I told myself a story that weed enhanced my vitality, that it was like, look at everything that I could do, look at how much better life is. And then it was like, well, I want to have a family. I want to take myself seriously. I want to be in a place that I could contribute more and do more. And like, I want to stop binge eating at night. Like, this is just I want to wake up earlier. Like, I need to do more. So I just started to tell myself a different story. And largely, that's what it comes down to. So even if there's a lot of things that are tethered to like the social elements, like I completely empathize with you. I was absolutely there. And if I was there today in your situation, like I probably would do the same thing. But what a better version of me would do is say, I get that that would be easier, but I don't do easy things anymore. And now I got to make the hard decisions. And I want to see what kind of energy that brings to my life. So,
That's perfect, man. It's a great way to kind of come full circle here with a little bit of mental toughness and having that sort of tough love perspective on your own life, regardless of whether it's running a super long run or if it's just trimming back some of the negative habits in your life. I think that's super impactful.
you're doing it right, man. You're definitely asking the right questions and being curious about the right things and honest about the areas of your life that you want to enhance. So, you're on the right path.
I appreciate that, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining the podcast today, man. I really appreciate your time. I thought we covered some awesome material today, and I don't want to steal too much of your time today on this Friday. So, if there's anything that you want to leave the listeners with, where they could find you, where they can connect with you, and anything else that's kind of up and coming in your life. I mean, obviously the marathon, but anything else that you want to mention, feel free to drop that now.
Thank you so much for hosting. You did a great job. Awesome questions. This was really cool, and you definitely made me think and appreciate a lot of the journey that I've been on. As much as I do introspection, it's always cool when someone else takes notice. So I appreciate the curiosity in terms of where you can find me. Jonathan Cohen, host of Inside the Inspired podcast. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you could follow it on all channels. Hopefully, it's easy to find. And you got this 58-mile ultra marathon coming up. Definitely excited about that. Thank you for asking questions about that as well. But would love to have you come visit us over at Inside the Inspired and come meet some high performers, see how they go about their blueprints and what you can learn. And yeah, subscribe to Danny's pod. He's doing a great job over here and keep following the curiosity, man.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that. And I'm looking forward to keeping up with you and all the next ventures over the next few years.
Likewise, man.